This is a surprising ruling, as family law matters are generally left to member states by the European Union. This includes Poland. Now the European Union Court of Justice has decided otherwise. EU citizenship. A member state is obliged to recognise the marriage of two EU citizens of the same sex legally contracted in another member state where they exercise their right to freedom of movement and residence. This case concerns two Polish citizens who were married in Germany. When they wanted to have their marriage certificate transcribed at a Polish registry office, they were refused. Rightly so. The law on civil status records is clear. Specifically, Article 83 states that a marriage outside the territory of the Republic of Poland by a Polish citizen is concluded in accordance with Polish law. If a marriage is to be concluded outside the Republic of Poland by a Polish citizen, or a foreigner who, in accordance with the provisions of the Act of February 4, 2011, private international law, the possibility of entering into a marriage is assessed on the basis of Polish law. They may receive a written certificate in paper form stating that, in accordance with Polish law, they may enter into the marriage. Pursuant to Article 107 of the same Act, the head of the registry office shall refuse to make a transcription if 1. The document is not recognised as a civil status document in the country of issue, or does not have the force of an official document, or was not issued by a competent authority, or raises doubts as to its authenticity, or confirms an event other than birth, marriage, or death. 2. The foreign document was created as a result of transcription in a country other than the country of the event. 3. The transcription will be contrary to the fundamental principles of the legal order in the Republic of Poland. Above all, there is also the Constitution, the fundamental law, which clearly states, Article 18, marriage as a union between a woman and a man, family, motherhood and parenthood are under the protection and care of the Republic of Poland. On the 25th of November, the Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that an EU member state is obliged to recognise a same-sex marriage legally contracted in another EU country, even if the law of that country does not recognise such unions. Sorry, Poland, you have to recognise our marriage. What now? How can we reconcile the clear legal acts of a member state of the Union, that is Poland, with the ruling of the CJEU, which does not constitute law? If someone asks me what to do with a ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, or what to do with a ruling of the Court of Justice of the European Union, there is only one answer. It must be enforced. Minister of Justice, Waldemar Żurek, already admits that before implementation, the law will have to be adapted. We will have to implement this ruling in some way, but I think this is the first step. We should simply educate people. Some lawyers argue that the Constitution does indeed provide for the protection of the family, men and women, but says nothing explicitly about same-sex marriages. Prime Minister Donald Tusk agrees with him. This is Europe. We will, of course, respect the rulings of the European courts, including on this issue. They apply to all those who live in other European countries, and when they come to Poland, we will want to treat them with full respect, but also in accordance with Polish law. And we see Donald Tusk, who is actually enthusiastic about it. It is against the Constitution, it is against Polish law, but we are to respect it. The Polish People's Party, one of the members of Tusk's coalition government, opposes the idea. First of all, we have a clear provision in Article 18 of the Constitution of the Republic of Poland defining what marriage is. We also have the relevant provisions in the Family Code and the Guardianship Code on this matter. Above the Constitution and statutory law, there is natural law, inscribed in the human heart by the Creator, and therefore, on the basis of natural law, regardless of the wording of Article 18 of the Constitution, I would be against it. Why does the CJEU take on such sensitive issues as family matters? When we joined the EU, we were assured that moral and family matters would be excluded. This is an attempt to interfere in our internal affairs. The CJEU has been usurping powers not granted to it in the treaty for a long time. In fact, it is not just judicial power that it wants to take over, but it is also usurping legislative and executive powers. Tuesday's ruling by the Court of Justice of the European Union may be the first attempt to change Polish law through the back door. In that case, there is nothing to prevent it from trying to do the same in other areas of life where it has no jurisdiction. Now we are supposed to accept same-sex marriages contracted abroad, and soon we will be forced to introduce them in our country, against the will of the majority of Poles. That is the logic of this system. But the CJEU ruling does not directly authorize the violation of the Polish constitution and other legal acts. It is not as simple as some people think, that it will be possible just to jump over the constitution and apply the law which, let us add, the CJEU adopted in a manner exceeding its competence. These are matters that do not fall under international regulation. They are matters closely related to the national identity of each state. The eagerness with which the implementation of the ruling has already been declared seems to foreshadow this. Removing videos talking about immigration, demonetizing accounts for discussing climate change, or labeling political satire as harmful. According to many, this is how the internet control system works in Germany. In theory, combating hate speech and protecting users. In practice, interference with freedom of speech on an unprecedented scale.
Informacje bardzo niepokojące.
This is very disturbing information. We know that restricting freedom of speech is the first step towards restricting other freedoms. We should do everything we can to ensure that Poland is a country where Polish internet users may write whatever they want online. And that may be difficult. Over 300 institutions are involved in reporting online content. These include ministries and universities. They have a special status as trusted reporters. So if they decide that something does not meet their standards of freedom of expression, the content simply disappears.
Cała ta siatka sygnalistów.
This entire network will inevitably be replaced by automated systems that will create a system for controlling and censoring content. This system has either already been created or will be created soon, and no information will escape its attention. In an era of restricted freedom of speech, attention should be paid to opinions expressed on social media. What's worse, this model isn't meant to operate only in Berlin. Experts have no doubt that it will go far beyond Germany's borders and become the model for all of Europe. Under the guise of the so-called fight against disinformation, the European Union is actually seeking to introduce censorship on the internet, censorship of the content that Poles read and produce on social media. They want to usurp rights and for some official to decide what should and should not be on the internet. In the opinion of the Polish President's office, this is a dangerous situation. That is why analysts are proposing simple safeguards. Instead of secret reports, details of who is removing material and why it should be public information. Experts also emphasize the need for easy appeal by users and special protection for political and satirical content so that it does not disappear from the internet under the guise of so-called security. Unfortunately, Western Europe, which for decades was a model of freedom for the Eastern Bloc, is now becoming more and more like the world described in Orwell's books. Freedom of speech is under threat in countries such as Germany, the United Kingdom and France. We know of cases of people being arrested in the United Kingdom simply for praying silently in front of abortion clinics. Germany, by introducing internet content monitoring, is cracking down on those who openly discuss problems of German society. Already today, there is no shortage of situations in Poland that are reminiscent of the communist era and the restriction of freedom of speech. An example? A few months ago in Gdansk, during election season, a man hung a banner on his balcony with the words, "Anything but Trzaskowski," during a visit by Trzaskowski, the candidate from the ruling party. The matter ended with police intervention in his room and an order to remove the banner. A similar situation took place when Mr. Kazimierz Litka, a resident of Nadazhin near Warsaw, hung a banner on the fence of his property with a graphic of the so-called Vistula line and the slogan, "They wanted to give half of Poland to the enemy," and a photo of Donald Tusk. The poster references an official military doctrine from the years when Donald Tusk was Prime Minister for the first time in the late 2000s, when Poland's official doctrine for war against an attacker from the east was to retreat all the way behind the Vistula. The poster caused emotions and reactions from the police, who quickly intervened. They told me to take down the banner because I was spreading hate speech. I looked for a smiling photo of him in the media, but couldn't find one, so I used the one that shows him as he is. And these are not the only cases that show that the boundaries of freedom of speech can be disturbingly fluid, as they are interpreted arbitrarily by politicians. The Polish government is also moving in this direction, the best example of which is the use of preventative censorship against opposition-aligned journalists, for example, by not allowing them to attend press conferences or by not providing public information. If this German model is transferred to Poland, freedom of speech will become an empty slogan. The repealing of free speech almost always looks exactly the same, salami slicing via harsh rulings on borderline cases, and the use of combating disinformation or hateful conduct as a pretext. If not stopped, Poland, and Europe more broadly, could easily sleepwalk into becoming yet another oppressive, censorship-heavy autocracy.
These shocking scenes were recorded shortly after the attack, 2 blocks from the White House in the heart of the American capital. 2 seriously injured soldiers on the ground. Next to them, the wounded attacker. The attacker fired the first shots. According to preliminary information, it was a planned attack. The authorities are calling it an ambush.
They had a person pinned on the ground yelling at him to stay down, and there was broken glass in the bus stop, and then they moved, like it was some sort of construction vehicle or something along those lines, and they moved the vehicle, and that's when we saw 2 National Guards on the ground, and 1 they were trying to resuscitate.
Both soldiers were taken to the hospital in critical condition. 20-year-old Sarah and 24-year-old Andrew were on their first patrol, just 24 hours after taking their oath. The attack came as a shock to the American public. Such an attack on U.S. soldiers on American soil is almost unbelievable. Authorities are investigating the perpetrator's motives.
The individual, the suspect, came around the corner. He immediately started firing a firearm at the 2 National Guard members. So at that time, there were other National Guard members that were in the area. They heard the gunfire. They actually were able to intervene and to kind of hold down the suspect after he had been shot on the ground until law enforcement got there within moments.
Even more shocking is the information about the perpetrator himself. According to the authorities, he is a 29-year-old fugitive from Afghanistan, a former American intelligence contact in Kandahar.
He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country. This attack underscores the single greatest national security threat facing our nation.
The infamous, chaotic evacuation of Kabul following the Taliban's surprise offensive and capture of the capital city was one of the greatest embarrassments in the history of the U.S. military. During the operations around the airport, 13 soldiers were killed in a bomb attack. Troops abandoned military equipment, including armored vehicles and helicopters, which fell into the hands of militants. The attack in Washington has already sparked a nationwide debate on security, particularly in the context of immigrants who have entered America either via the southern border or on evacuation flights.
We will never back down. We will secure our capital. We will secure our cities. In fact, this happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand. And that's why President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army to the National Guard, to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C.
At the same time, immigration services have suspended the processing of all immigration applications submitted by Afghan citizens until security procedures and verifications have been reviewed.